Hello and welcome to the latest Science of Sport podcast. I'm your host Matt Solomon, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Hidde Weersma. So Hidde is a strength and conditioning coach at Sports Centre Papendal, one of the Dutch Olympic training centres, and he's the under-24 Hyrox world champion. Today we're going to discuss how he became world champion and how you can train for Hyrox to improve your performance. So without further ado, it's time to welcome Hidde onto the show. So Hidde, welcome to the Science of Sport podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you very much for joining us. So, can you give us a quick introduction as to who you are and what you've been up to until now?
Yeah, sure. I'm Hidde Weersma, 25 years old, and as a job, I now work part-time at Papendal, which is the largest Dutch Olympic training facility, as an SSC coach. And besides that, I also have my own company and I do SNC related stuff, or people can come with sports science related questions, stuff like that. And before I started working there, I studied human movement sciences at the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam, both the Bachelor and the Master.
Absolutely excellent. So, we're here to discuss Hyrox, which is a relatively new sport. Can you take us through your relationship with Hyrox? Like, why are we talking about it with you?
Maybe I will start with my background in sports. So first I did a little bit of athletics and football. After a while I started strength training when I was around 13 years old. So that was already quite early. But then after a while I started to miss the endurance side of things, and my older sister participated in triathlon competitions. So thanks to her, I also started triathlon, and for a couple of years I combined strength training and triathlon. But then 2 years ago came Hyrox, which, we will touch upon the exact sport itself later, but it is a combination of strength and endurance. So that's right up my sleeve, and I started doing it 2 years ago, and that was quite successful. I'm happy with the performances I set there, and I'm now two-time world champion in the age category until 24 years old. So it's going good.
Perfect. So, what's the next steps as well? Obviously, we're going to discuss how you're training and how you're working towards that. But you mentioned you're 25, you're world champion under 24, so that's not going to happen again.
No, it's not.
what have you got to do now? What's the next steps in your Hyrox career?
Well, like the pinnacle of the sport is called the Elite 15, and they're the 15 elite of the 15 best athletes of the entire world can challenge themselves in that category, and the winner of that category is like world champion overall. So that will hopefully be the next step for me.
Absolutely excellent. How far away are you from that, if I can ask?
I'm now at the world ranking, I think, in place 23,
Okay.
but I haven't raced this season yet, and I hope to be able to improve my time. I'm quite new at the sport, so you do notice that you get a little bit better, quite easily over time, and that it's not you don't need hours and hours of practice to get 1% better.
Yeah. Excellent. So obviously we discussed a little bit about what you do and what you've done until now, but what is the sport then? Because there's going to be some people who are really into it and they're super excited to hear about how you train for it, but there's going to be a load of people who are like, what on earth is that? So talk us through what you do in this sport.
Well, like we mentioned before, it's a combination of strength and endurance. So you start with a 1K run, and then you go to exercise number 1, which I will explain later, and then you go to another 1K run, and then you go to exercise number 2, and you repeat that until you had 8 times a 1K run and 8 times a different exercise. And the different exercises are firstly 1,000 meter on the ski erg, then 50 meters sled push, 50 meters sled pull, 80 meters of burpee broad jumps, 1K on the row, 200 meters of farmer's carry, 100 meters of lunges, and 100 wall balls. And maybe also good to explain is that you have different categories. So you have the singles category where differentiated in the open category and the pro category. And the difference there is actually only that the weights for the exercises are heavier in the pro category. And besides that, you also have the doubles category, and there you can sign up with a partner. And sadly, for some people, you still need to run the entire 8K, but you can alternate the exercises between you and your partner, so you don't have to do all the exercises by yourself.
Okay, so when you kind of piece all that together, what does that feel like? Because it sounds dreadful.
Yeah, it kind of is.
This is what you do for fun, by the way.
yeah, it is. Well, especially like the first time, I was like sore for 5 days because because you have all those different exercises and all those different runs, you feel your entire body after a while is it's just going to get sore, and it's hurting, and your heart is pumping and your lungs are starting to ache. But the challenge is fun. Not all the exercises are fun.
No, it doesn't sound great. It sounds fun when it's over and like 2 days later you're proud of yourself, but like the first initial bit of recovery doesn't sound great.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that it's strength and endurance, right? So what are the physical qualities that you need? Is it just strength and endurance? Are there other factors that play into that?
Well, just to start, like for instance, my best time in the singles pro is like 59 minutes. So it's a 59-minute continuous effort. So first of all, you will say that endurance is probably the most important part. For every other sport, when you are busy for almost an hour, everybody will say, oh, it's an endurance part. So you need a high VO2 max. You need to be able to work at a high percentage of your VO2 max for a long time. And you need to be able to move efficiently. So all that energy that you can produce, you actually use to go forward or to produce power during the row. So that's the endurance part. But because there are all those different exercises, you need to be technically efficient at all kinds of different exercises and not only one. And also in different kinds of like movements in terms of muscle contraction, range of motion, stuff like that. So you need to be quite versatile for a good Hyrox athlete. And yeah, we also covered the exercises just now. So you also, for some exercises like the lunges or also the sled push and pull, which are quite heavy, you also need some strength or strength endurance. How depends a little bit on how you look at it.
And what kind of weights are on the sled? Because that might give people a bit of an idea. Is it 500 kilos and you're just doing like 1 rep max sled, or is it just like I don't know, 20 kilos and you kind of whiz through it?
I'm glad it's not 500 kilos. No, with the Men Pro, it's 175 kilos is on the sleds, and with the sled pull, it's 125. But one thing I do need to say is that during a Hyrox, it is on a different kind of carpet that it's usually in a gym. So when you have like that artificial turf, which is often used in a gym for on the sled, those are easier than the carpet on the Hyrox. So then you easily need to add 20 or 30 kilos to your sled to get a little bit of same sensations for the sled. And,
so it's pretty heavy, right? You're not moving that sled very quickly.
Yeah, no, it's not that you start pushing and the entire 50 meters, you just go. You do need some moments of short rest in between. And that's also important for the race itself, because during those exercises you are forced to go a little bit into your anaerobic capacity. So it's not only a continuous effort in the sense of that you do different things, but you also need to switch between different energy systems during the race. So you need to be your endurance needs to be good, which we covered. You need to be versatile, and you need to be able to switch between those different energy systems during the race.
So with those things in mind, obviously you're trying to do a lot of different things at once, right? So you need high maximal strength, high strength endurance, some kind of resistance to lactate fatigue, and aerobic endurance, which is all of the things. So how do you go about training that?
Well, it's thankfully not all of these things, because I'm not a fast sprinter or a good. My vertical jump is not very good, so I'm happy that's not included. But on the other side, you do need to train a lot of things, and it also depends a little bit how you train on your background. So when you talk with other athletes, some athletes train in an entirely different way than I do. And I'm, of course, influenced by my triathlon and strength background. So I still do also a lot of work on the bike, or I do also a lot of swimming in the pool. And especially at the start of the season, I just work it like my aerobic base. So all kinds of low intensity endurance. And I actually also don't do that much of the specific Hyrox movement. So then it's a lot of running, bike, swim, and max strength training. So I will combine those in my preparation phase, if you would call it that. And then, actually over time, I just start to do a little bit more high intensity work, a little bit more of Hyrox specific movements or circuits, until the race. So that's globally how I plan over a longer period of time.
Excellent. So when we break that down, right? So obviously we can touch on all of those different qualities, but let's start with the gym session. What does a gym session look like for you then? So you're hitting maximum strength, or you're doing the specific work. What might that look like?
Yeah. So at my preparation phase, I will start with like more traditional kind of strength training. So you can think like, 5 to 8 reps of squats. I don't do deadlifts that much, but more trap bar deadlift or Romanian deadlift, right grip rack pull. I like that one a lot. And for upper body, especially the back and the shoulders are really important. So I do a lot of Pendlay rows I really like, or just strict overhead presses. That's like in the preparation phase. And at the start, I try to become stronger at those exercises, but after a while, when I hit certain weights and I'm happy about those, then I try to increase the volume with quite heavy weights, but I try to decrease the rest time between my sets. So then after a while, I'm, for instance, doing an EMOM, or you can also call it like a cluster set, but like where I do 5 reps every minute with 75% of my 1RM. And then first I do every minute on the minute for 5 times, but after a while I try to do it like every 50 seconds. So then I will cut down on the rest times in between. And then after a while, when the races are really getting there, then I will actually only do maintenance work. So maybe 2 sets for lower body, a squat pattern and hinge pattern, and one leg squat pattern, and some upper body work. And then after that, I will do like a circuit with different Hyrox specific exercises and do that on a high pace.
And when we look at that Hyrox specific work, then what might that encapsulate? Because I imagine at least you can't every single training session do an entire Hyrox.
No,
right?
Definitely not. So at the start, when I start to transfer a little bit more to the Hyrox specific work, I only choose for a single session like 2 or 3, maybe 4 exercises to rotate a lot of those exercises also, because you then get a high volume of those specific exercises. And then only after the races are more approaching, then I will start doing some workouts where I do like maybe 6, 7, or maybe even all 8 exercises, but I don't do that much.
And why do you choose then not to do that? Is it like a fatigue thing? Is it a total training volume thing that if you do a session like that you just can't recover in time for the next session?
Yeah, then in my experience, it's physically and mentally quite demanding to do all those different exercises in a single session. So I rather choose to have like a circuit more based on upper body. So then I will, for instance, do my burpees, farmer's carry, and some wall balls where I don't do the entire squat, for instance. So that one really hurts my shoulders, for instance. And then another day I will do a circuit where I do a lot of sled push, sled pull, and some work on the rower, for instance. So that's really more lower body dominant. And then because I had that lower body dominant session, then the next day I still can have a decent session in the swimming pool, or for upper body Hyrox specific movements, or for an upper body strength session.
So I'm interested to see how you piece all this together in just a second, but I want to touch on the endurance stuff as well first. So that's your thing as well, right? So
Yeah.
triathlon background, you can do your endurance work is really impressive. But what do you do in a week then? What does that endurance work look like? What are the kind of intensities that you're using? How does that look for you?
Yeah, it of course depends on the period of the year, but at the start of the year, actually all my work is low intensity work, and only once a week then I do a high intensity run session. But all the work on the bike, on the swimming pool, and also the work on the rower or the ski erg is all just easy. Um, and now I'm approaching some of the races, so now it's getting a little bit more intense. But the volume, of course, for the swim and the bike will go down because those are not very specific. And I do run now like around 4 times a week, so that comes down to like 50 or 60 kilometers a week. But actually, still only one of those sessions is a high intensity session, and I do that because I also have all those circuits, which actually also are high intensity. So, in my opinion, I don't need more high intensity work than only one really high intensity session for the run.
And when you look at things like heart rate zones, for example, what are we thinking out if you're doing 60 kilometers? Obviously, that's a decent number of hours next to all of your other training. So what are we looking at in terms of intensity there? Is it like sort of zone 2, really easy nose breathing stuff?
Yeah, if you would view it from a 5 zone model, it will all be zone 2 work. So my heart rate will be around 135, 140, something like that.
Yeah, so that's like some kind of polarized model where you say the easy stuff is easy and the difficult stuff is difficult.
Yeah. And that's also like I only do one high intensity session, just like I mentioned before. You have all those circuits, and also some of the exercises of Hyrox, like if you want to do the sled push or sled pull with the weights that you use for Hyrox, or also burpees, you can't really do those exercises in a low intensity manner. So you are already quite forced to do quite some high intensity stuff if you want to train specific for Hyrox. So, and yeah, but you also need the endurance, and for endurance you want just to make a high number of training hours. So therefore I choose to do it this way.
And how many hours a week in total are you training then?
In total is on average around 17, 18 hours. And I think around 4 of those hours are like strength work. And then I will have around, the rest is like, of course, endurance work. But I think like at the start of the preparation phase, around 90% of that is like swim, bike, run. But now I'm like at 60% is swim, bike, run, and the other 40% of that endurance work are like Hyrox circuits.
And how do you combine that in a week then? So obviously, like you've got a job, you've
Yeah,
got a part-time job in literally doing all of that exercise. How does that look in a week? Because obviously the intensities are really difficult to manage. So you've got lots of high intensity work, especially when you come into an event. At some point, you're going to need to taper. So how does your training week look when it comes down to planning those different moments?
well, I don't have that job for too long, so maybe I will be burned out in a couple of weeks. But
Yeah.
uh, no, yeah. So I, of course, think about very clearly, like, um, yeah, how do I plan my week in terms of uh, like I mentioned before, like how can I have a little bit of a lower body training day, and then day after maybe an upper body day. So a setup I like very much is do on Monday, for instance, a long low intensity run, and then later in the evening I can do just some upper body strength or some ski erg, or maybe even the rower or some farmer's walk. Those are fine, even if you did the run before. But then the day after that, I will do a long session on the bike, just to pedal out a little bit the soreness of the run. and then later that day I can have like a very decent strength, lower body strength session. If you eat during the bike and after the bike, but that's very
I've
good
seen you
manageable.
eat a lot, so
Yeah, yeah. But then the day after, so on Wednesday, I will do a swim, because then my legs are often sore. So, but then just swimming is entirely fine. And then later in the day, you can even again do a upper body strength day or do some exercises for Hyrox, which are for upper body. And then on the Thursday, then my legs are rested, and then I can do my high intensity run. So I try to manage it a little bit in that way that after a strength session, if it doesn't matter if it is for lower body or upper body, but the day after I want to give those muscles rest. And in my experience, I can easily manage to do first an endurance session on the day, and later on the day still do some quite good strength sessions, but I don't like it the other way around.
Okay, and are there people who then do that differently? Because you mentioned earlier that some people train entirely differently to this as well. So are there other options?
Well, that's more. There are, for instance, some people coming with a CrossFit background, so you will see that they don't put all the hours on the bike or the swim or even a lot of hours on the run, but they get like a sort also aerobic stimulus from doing different kind of circuits, which they are used from their CrossFit background. Um, so that's a little bit more how they do it differently. And something also a lot of people do differently is that some people do way more Hyrox specific stuff over the entire year. Uh, but in my experience, that's quite, like I mentioned before, mentally and physically quite challenging. So, uh, but that's also a little bit, yeah, what are you used to do before you started your Hyrox career, to call it that? Yeah, I have my background in triathlon, so I know really well what a bike session or a swim session or a run session will do with me. But someone who has a more background in strength will have more experience with what those kinds of sessions will bring them. Uh, so therefore, you see that everybody sticks a little bit to their own background, but maybe in a couple of year times when the sports is more developed and more people are doing it for a longer period of time, maybe then people will also start to train differently for it. I do notice myself, for instance, that those Hyrox specific work starts to get easier in terms of doing some sort of volume. I can do more volume now than I do a year ago, for instance.
Okay, and you mentioned obviously that it's going to develop. So yeah, the sport's young. Where do you think it's going to go in the future? Like, what's the future of Hyrox? Because it's getting pretty popular, right?
Yeah, it's getting pretty popular. It's going really well with the sport itself. Also, like in the Netherlands, yeah, you first started with only one event, and now already you have three. And also the number of participants at each event, yes, going up and up, and you actually see that over the entire globe. So that's really cool. Yeah, where it will end, I'm not entirely sure, but I think because yeah, the exercises are not technically that challenging. So I think it can work really well as a mass participation event, and also therefore make it more durable over the course or over multiple years. Um, and also you see that like the elite are getting more elite races and more prize money, which also makes sure that those guys are starting to invest more and more into the sport. So in terms of for the future, it looks good, I think, for Hyrox.
And do you think that there's going to be the potential to be a professional Hyrox athlete at some point?
That I think you do, but you do maybe need some sponsors around you, or maybe I at this moment in time, or also for the future, I don't see that the prize money or the contracts from Hyrox will be that high that someone can live a normal life with that kind of prize money or contract. So I don't think so.
I think it's an interesting one to look at for the future as well, because
Yeah.
obviously with all of the extra attention comes the possibility for prize money. So I can imagine that some people would want to go for it or would want to take the chance on it. So yeah, really interesting stuff. Hidde, massive thanks for your time and effort today. It's been a pleasure talking. Where can people find a little bit more about you and what you're up to?
I'm starting to get more and more active on Instagram, so you can follow me there. It's just Hidde.w, or you can also find me on LinkedIn. And I also have my own website, but it's only in Dutch, so you can hit the translate button. But that one is called highperformancefactory.nl.
Perfect. Hidde, massive thanks for your time. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to speaking again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Bye,
buddy. Bye. And that's it. Once again, a massive thanks to Hidde for all of his hard work on today's podcast. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure you did at home too. Before you leave, I want to point you in the direction of the Science of Sport Coach Academy. The Coach Academy is an overgrowing library of sports science courses, which are broken down to bite-sized chunks, which means you can fit it in and around your busy coaching schedule. And every time you complete one of those courses, you get a certificate of completion, which can prove your ongoing education. So if you're interested, you can get into the Coach Academy completely for free using the link in the show notes for the next 7 days. And if you have enjoyed today's podcast, it'd be fantastic if you could recommend us to a coach, a colleague, an athlete, or a friend. That means that we can keep bringing you the best possible guests and the best possible content. And that's it. Once again, a massive thanks from me and Matt Solomon for Science of Sport, and I'll speak to you next week.